This is the translation of a BND report on September 11, 2001, compiled by the BND in March 2002. Top secret background report on the 11th September 2001. Do not stamp, do not sign, do not write on, do not mark. On Monday, August 6, 2001, at 5:50 p.m., our German ambassador personally notified the President of the United States that information developed by the Bundesamt FDR Verfassungsschutz, this is the German Domestic Secret Service, as well as the BND, this is the German Foreign Secret Service, indicated clearly that an attack by a radical Arab group partially based in Germany was to occur on September 10 to 11, 2001. The President was at that time in residence at his farm in Texas. Our German ambassador was acting in direct response to instructions from Foreign Minister Fischer. This information was developed from official surveillance of Arab extremist groups operating in the Federal Republic, as well as from intercepted communications between the Embassy of Israel and the Israeli Foreign Ministry in Tel Aviv concerning this matter. The information was gratefully received by the U.S. President, who stated at the time that he was also aware of the same pending assaults. Subsequent to these attacks, the Office of the U.S. President, through the U.S. Department of State, made an urgent request to the federal government of Germany that no reference whatsoever should be made to the official warnings given by Ambassador Escher. In order to clarify the background of this matter, this overall survey of the events leading to the assault was prepared, basing on extracts of reports from our Secret Service stations abroad. Overall, it is evident that the American authorities were aware of the pending attacks. Why they did nothing is explained in the following. Background, general overview. Because of the Bush family's involvement in oil, the Patriot Oil Company, many important and wealthy individuals and corporations with oil interests financially supported the Bush political career. Today, the Bush administration is therefore strongly influenced by major American business groups. The candidate for American Vice President, Richard Dick Cheney, had been the chief director of the Halliburton Company. This company, based in Dallas, Texas, where Bush was governor, is the largest oil service company in the world. Between 1991 through 1997, such important American oil companies as Texaco, Unocal, Shell, BP Amoco, Chevron and ExxonMobil became involved with the former Soviet state of Kazakhstan, who hold enormous oil reserves. The government of Kazakhstan was eventually paid over $3 billion of corporate money to allow these companies to secure oil rights. At the same time, these companies agreed further to give the sums of $35 billion in investments in plant and equipment to the Kazakhstan projects. A confidential project report of said U.S. firms announced that the gas and oil reserves in Kazakhstan would amount to $4 trillion. The United States is not self-sufficient in oil, and 50% of their supply is imported from various foreign sources. Some 80% of oil imported to the U.S. comes from OPEC countries, the Arabian oil cartel. Because of the unconditional support by American political leaders of the State of Israel, these Arab governments have a very strained relationship with the USA. The further smaller percentage of oil imported to the U.S. comes from Venezuela. Just recently, the U.S. government has been attempting to overthrow the government of Chavez with the help of the CIA and replace it with a government more sympathetic to American oil needs. The position paper prepared by the office of the later Vice President Cheney states that the Kazakhstan oil reserves would be more than sufficient to supply U.S. needs for at least a decade and would further reduce American dependence on OPEC. A local oil company signed an agreement with the reigning Taliban forces as well as their opponents, the Northern Alliance, in order to permit an oil pipeline to be built through Afghanistan direct through Pakistan to the Indian Ocean. By this, the exorbitant rates charged by the Russians to use their pipelines would be avoided. Unocal then opened official offices in Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan to facilitate the construction of this oil pipeline. In December of 1997, official Taliban representatives were in the United States to attend a conference at Unocal headquarters in Texas to discuss the Afghanistan pipeline. These talks failed because the Taliban made what Unocal felt were excessive financial demands. In 1998, internal strife in Afghanistan and inherent instability in Pakistan reached such levels as to render the pipeline project impossible to execute. In the same year, the Houston, Texas-based firm of Enron suggested instead to build a $3 billion oil pipeline parallel to the Russian pipelines, running westwards rather than taking the shorter but more problematic route south. In a secret memorandum by Cheney, it is stated that the Unocal Company was prepared to finance the southern route. According to this project would take 5 years to complete, and its annual revenues from the successful completion of this pipeline would approximate $1 billion. However, and this has been the subject of a number of secret American reports, the only thing standing in the way of the construction of this pipeline was the basic opposition of the Afghanistan government and its political supporters. On May 8, 2001, the U.S. Department of State, in the name of the Secretary of State Powell, gave $43 million to the Taliban in order to facilitate their cooperation in the pipeline project. On June 10, 2001, the BND warned the CIA office in the U.S. Embassy to the Federal Republic of Germany that certain Arab terrorists were planning to seize American commercial aircraft for use as weapons of destruction against significant American symbols. This was considered a general warning only. The Federal Republic's warning of August 6, however, was specific as to date, time and places of the attacks. On July 11, 2001, in Berlin, U.S. officials, Thomas Simmons, the former American ambassador to Pakistan, Lee Coldren, State Department expert on Asian matters, and Carl Hinderforth, Assistant Secretary of State for Asian Matters, met with Russian and Pakistani intelligence officers. At this meeting, which was under surveillance, it was stated by the Americans that the United States planned to launch military strikes against Afghanistan in October of that year. The purpose of these strikes was to topple the Afghanistan government and the Taliban in order to replace it with a government more sensitive to the needs of American oil interests. In mid-August 2001, President of the Russian Federation Putin ordered that the American authorities be warned of pending attacks on government buildings inside the United States. This warning was conveyed to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow and via the Russian ambassador's office directly to the U.S. President. On August 20, the government of France, through the American embassy in Paris and their embassy in Washington, issued a more specific warning. This warning specified the exact date, time and places of the attacks. On September 11, President Bush and top aides flew to the state of Florida so that the president could speak with children in a kindergarten. Also at that time, Vice President Cheney absented himself from Washington and went to the safety of the presidential compound in the mountains of Maryland. It was noted in Washington that Cheney remained sequestered in Maryland for some time and only appeared in public surrounded by heavy security. A role of the Israeli Mossad in the terrorist attacks. Note: the following two sections are considered to be extremely sensitive due to the special relationship between the Federal Republic of Germany and its Jewish citizens as well as the State of Israel. This material is compiled from German and American sources. During the term of President George H.W. Bush, the government of Israel made an official, but very secret, request of the American president. This request was to permit agents of the Mossad, Israeli Foreign Intelligence, to enter the United States and conduct surveillance operations against various Arab groups residing in that country. The stated purpose of this surveillance was to permit Israeli early warning of terrorist plots against their country. Permission for this surveillance was granted with the caveat that the Mossad would have a liaison with the FBI and report any and all findings to that agency. However, these conditions were not observed. The Mossad not only did not inform the FBI of any of its findings, it is known to have engaged in commerce with several groups of Israeli criminals of Russian backgrounds. These groups were engaged in extensive criminal activities inside the United States, to include the smuggling of the ecstasy drug. Mossad agents were able to subvert American criminal investigations through their knowledge of American telephone surveillance of such groups. It is very evident from surveillance conducted against Mossad agents in the Federal Republic as well as interceptions of Israeli diplomatic communication from the Federal Republic to Telephone Aviv, that the Mossad had successfully penetrated various extremist Arab groups in both the Federal Republic and the United States. These investigations disclosed in late May of 2001 that an attack was to be made against certain specified targets in the American cities of Washington and New York. But it was apparent that the Mossad was not only fully aware of these attacks well in advance but actually, through their own agents inside the Arab groups, assisted in the planning and the eventual execution of the attacks. That the Israeli government was fully aware of these attacks is absolutely certain and proven. Diplomatic traffic between the Israeli embassy in the Federal Republic and the Israeli Foreign Office made it very clear that Minister-President Sharon was fully aware of this pending attack and urgently wished that no attempt was made to prevent the attacks. Although the Israeli officials were instructed to warn the American intelligence community that some kind of an attack might be possible, at no time were the specific dates and targets known at that time to Israeli officials to be given to the Americans. The rationale for this attitude was expressed in a conversation on August 1, 2001, between the Israeli military attaché in the Federal Republic to a member of the Israeli General Staff. There it was stated that Israel believed an attack on the continental United States would so inflame American public opinion that they would permit Israel to cleanse their state of Arab terrorists and those who support such terrorists. This cleansing was explained as the expulsion of all Arabs, and even Christian groups, from the Palestine area. American intelligence officials have repeatedly expressed great concern in meetings with our people that the Israeli government, through a company called Amdocs, was able to conduct surveillance of all telephone communications within the United States. It was categorically stated that this Israeli-based firm was given an American contract with 25 of the largest American telephone companies. This contract was granted over the objections and concerns of the American intelligence community. The official reason given for this extraordinary arrangement that permitted Israeli agencies to observe all highly confidential investigative telephone calls was that the United States had a special relationship with the State of Israel and they had requested this. The Israeli political influence in the United States. It should be noted here that the professional Israeli lobby in America is huge in size and is considered even by our American colleagues to be a very powerful and entirely dominant factor in American politics. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee is the largest foreign lobby in Washington and the fourth most powerful lobby in the country. Other Israeli groups also include the Anti-Defamation League, from whose national offices, along with the Israel Trade Mission and the many Israeli consulates, many Mossad agents were working, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs and the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting in America. These groups, in conjunction with Jewish-dominated media giants like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek magazine, the Los Angeles Times, Time Warner AOL and their CNN News Network, basically control the dissemination of news in the United States. It is therefore almost impossible for any news that would be considered in opposition to Israeli interests to appear before the American public, although such stories are readily available in most European media. A role of the Christian fundamentalists in American politics. The so-called Christian right consists of Protestant fundamentalists, where the so-called Pentecostals play the dominant role. This is a very fanatical and aggressively missionary denomination that believes in a return of the living Christ to earth and the subsequent elevation of its members to heavenly paradise. In order for this appearance of Christ to occur, several factors must be in place according to the views of this denomination. In the first place, the number of Jews must convert to Christianity, and in the second, there must be a rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. As the site of this temple is now occupied by a major Islamic mosque, it will be necessary to destroy this building. Starting as an Episcopalian, Bush tried other Protestant denominations before joining the Pentecostals. Apart from U.S. President Bush and his Attorney General Ashcroft, other members of his administration are members of this denomination, too, which is the second largest Christian denomination after the Catholic Church. As a considerable part of the American public sentiment is strongly opposed to religious fanatics, these facts have been kept very quiet. Bush and his entourage are very strong supporters of the State of Israel because of their belief that the founding of this nation is viewed as another requirement for the return of Christ. For this reason, Bush unconditionally supports any program put forward by the Israeli government and is a devoted follower and supporter of Sharon, the Israeli right-wing extremist minister-president. Attorney General Ashcroft has stated in a public sermon he is a lay preacher of the Pentecostal Church that the Muslims are quote agents of the Antichrist unquote and that they must be destroyed in the so-called Battle of Armageddon. According to the beliefs of fundamentalist Christians, this battle will be fought over Israel's existence and will lead to the end of the world and the return of Christ. It is generally known in Washington that Bush is entirely guided by his religious beliefs and that he has been attempting repeatedly to force his views onto the American public by means of various disguised programs, such as religious control of charities, unconditional support of Israel, and so forth. Summary and Outlook. The terrorist attacks on American targets were fully known to many entities well in advance. The U.S. President was fully informed as to the nature and exact time of these attacks. The U.S. government in general and the U.S. President in specific have become subservient to the wishes and plans of the Israeli government. As these plans encompass the removal of the Arab population of Israel and adjoining territories, it is evident that the population of the United States is being pushed into a situation that could easily result in more, and terrible, attacks on their home country. In view of this possibility, the U.S. authorities are determined to limit any discussion of the September 11 attacks to the official version as it appears regularly in the U.S. media. It also appears from confidential sources that Bush's plans to attack Iraq are based mainly on the desire on the part of Israel to remove Saddam Hussein. Telephone Aviv views Hussein as a real threat and has already attacked that country before. There is also evidence that if Hussein is toppled by American military force, the oil resources of Iraq would be put under the control of a consortium of the American oil interests that so avidly support the Bush administration. Pollack, Germany, April 5, 2002.